Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge. I remember back in the day, it used to be a Family Dollar and Walmart and the deep discount stores were doing well. It was because Americans were trading down. But now everybody is saying, go, go, go. The market looks like it's off to the races because of these retail sales. But is it really? Bang! Bang.
The Rebel's Edge is ready, baby. Last one of the week, John.
That's right. Last one of the week, folks. We do them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday when the markets permit. And that means that, sometimes we're closed on one of those days because of a holiday. But other than that, we try to get 4 of these shows in a week. And we welcome all of you back to the Rebel's Edge. We're going to dive right into Macro Minute because there was a lot on our plate today, Pete. And one of the big positives was that Walmart says they don't see a recession on the horizon. And believe it or not, folks, they might be one of the canaries in the coal mine when there is a potential for some sort of a pullback or a recession. But they're saying, hey, consumers are here and they're spending even though the prices are up.
Well, and the data is what we've been saying, John, is the major mover. And all you've got to do is look at what was going on in the market before we started to get some of the data numbers out there. The retail sales, they were up 1%. They were looking for an up 0.4%. That was big. And I think that people pounced on that. The Dow was up 100. Next thing you know, it's up 400. The NASDAQ was actually in the red. It started to run as well. And I think a part of that is weekly jobless claims that dropping. I think that's another one where people are looking at it saying, well, maybe, just maybe, we can get there where we need to get. And so I think that's part of it as well. But to your point with Walmart, that's really, and they said the consumer's strong. Well, yeah, that consumer's strong because of all the trade downs. Now a lot of people have gotten sticky and they're probably going there more. I brought it up the other day. I said, gluten-free, which my family has, I've got a few people in the family that have issues. The gluten-free section at Walmart is as good as anywhere. And I brought this up the other day about you can compare it right there to Whole Foods or Whole Paycheck, as we like to call it, or anybody else out there. And it's a little bit less expensive. So it's really working out well. And clearly what Walmart did, and we're going to talk about that, but it's a heck of a quarter they just put up.
Yep, certainly was. Well, Pete, as far as fantastic futures, I will say that precious metals, in particular, platinum and silver, they're both up really strong. Gold's holding on to about 0.7% gain, just shy of 2,500 an ounce. But I really think it is about those metals because the more people believe that rates go down, Pete, the more they believe that the precious metals are more competitive because, of course, they don't pay a dividend. So as rates are higher, some people would transfer some of that money that they would have put in gold and instead go over into those higher yielding certificates one way or another. But right now, with rates looking like they're going lower, precious metals are going higher.
Yep, that is the move for sure. Do we want to run that clip now or you want to run it later? How do you want to do this, John? Let's run this thing now about the volatility index. What do you think? Spike. Everybody said, oh my goodness, 65, then it was 50, then it was 40, then it was 30, then it was in the 20s. Now we're below that and we're in the 19s. Now I heard a lot of folks who have no clue on life that, oh, you know what, this is going to stick for a while. Oh, really? Huh. So you think we're going to hang around up there in a 50 VIX? It's not going to happen. It'll hold for a little while, maybe, and it didn't even do that this time. We are all the way back to that area that we came from, John. Call it 15 to 19. That's kind of where I think we're going to be very, very soon. We're pretty close, sitting right at 19 right now for the VIX.
Yeah, well, you nailed it, Pete. And clearly we have continued to trade lower for the VIX. It just doesn't hold on to a 3% or 4% move a day. I mean, even on a day like today, when the S&P 500 is up strong today, NASDAQ up strong, Dow up strong, we're looking at 1.25% to as much as 2% for the NASDAQ. That doesn't justify a 50 VIX.
Right. Yeah, what people don't understand, John, and that's why it's so interesting to me to hear the others. So many people out there say, The VIX is irrelevant. It doesn't really tell you anything. Really, I think if you would have followed this VIX pretty closely, you actually would have said the exact opposite. And I think anybody who doesn't is an idiot. So when you look at this whole thing, the volatility index, yeah, it was up in the 50s. To your point, are you really going to have a 3 to 4% move every single day in the S&P? Every day is going to have to be 3 to 4% if it's going to hang up there, right? We're not seeing that. We are seeing exactly what you just described, which is, okay, we're getting some big moves. You're up 400 or 500 points on the Dow. That's a great move. It's also only 1.5%. And then look over at the S&P, you're up 83 points. That's 1.5%. That isn't anywhere close to where we should be if we were going to be up there. So a little bit better than 16. That sounds about right. By the way, where are we right now? Last I looked, we were about 15. So it looks to me like the VIX has been exactly right and given us, it's like a divining rod, right? I mean, it's exactly giving us exactly where it is and where the markets are. And I think that the VIX is still incredibly important.
It is always important to watch it. And those that don't do so at their own peril, Pete.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Walmart because we talked about it top of the show. Used to be, I've been trading long enough that Walmart was more or less the really cheap stuff, Pete. Yes, they had some things that were, sort of middle of the road or whatever, but a lot of it was just really cheap. Maybe not as cheap as Big Lots, but really cheap. And now, like you said, if you want gluten-free, you've got it there. If you want any kind of organic, you probably have it there, and probably at half the price that you'd pay at Whole Paycheck. So they put up some numbers that were pretty astounding. They did say that they don't see a recession on the horizon. Their newest businesses like Marketplace, advertising, and memberships for their Sam's Club and so forth, or their online retail site, Pete, are all exploding. This is a great quarter for them. And we did have some unusual activity, Pete. We had people betting. The stock was, way down there in the $62 range after that big sell-off a week ago Monday, the 5th of August. Well, look at it today. It was 73 earlier. That's when I took just before the open, and it's still holding 73. What's the right to buy it at 65 worth when it's trading 73, Pete? The answer is $8 plus. So bang, another nice strong quarter for Walmart and a great trade for us.
Yeah, and hitting 52-week highs, it shouldn't surprise people because we talked about the trade down, but also we talked about how sticky is it? And clearly it's extremely sticky. They're doing extremely well. They're expanding out. You talked about some of the newer businesses. I think that's huge as well. It diversifies the profits, which is important, I think. Net sales expectations, when they were given some of the guidance, John, absolutely extraordinary. I mean, they absolutely crushed it in every way that you could want to. It's amazing. The volumes are there as well to support this move to the upside. So the comp sales up 4% on a beat. These guys are doing everything right, and they are actually moving a little bit more. I'm not saying high end. They're not going to the high end retail by any stretch, but higher than they once were. And there's a lot of stuff out there that you see a lot of folks that are probably wealthy enough to do what they want still buying things over there at Walmart for sure.
Yeah, and I love shop that we have several of them here on the island, Pete, and I hit them all the time. Yep. They're great. Prices are reasonable, and they're really paying attention to what people want. Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk just for a sec about Cisco, Pete. Optical networking, yes, Cisco's in that space. They absolutely blew out their numbers. And one thing that I'll mention, Pete, that I think a lot of people just sort of do it as an afterthought, and I'm not going to do that, is they're going to cut 7% of the workforce. Now, they already had a reduction in force or a RIF back in February of over 4,000 people lost their jobs in February. Pete and I are never going to be dancing on that, folks. That's bad. But obviously, the company will make more money, bring more to the bottom line because of it. Now they're cutting another 6,000 or more people, Pete. So you put those two together, 10,000 jobs lost. There are so many companies that are cutting people right here. That's why it was important what Walmart had to say about the recession, because we see more people cutting than we do hiring, Pete.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you're exactly right. I mean, 10,000 year to date, that's pretty awful, unfortunately, for all 10,000 of those people. But it's the business decisions that have to be made when you're talking about being in that big business, whether it's Cisco or Apple or anybody else, Amazon, you name it. But they also talked about AI a lot. And one of the things was over $1 billion in orders in AI. They expect that to be even bigger. When you look at the balance sheet here, John, not only does it look pretty close to perfect, but you look at free cash flow of just about $14.5 billion. I mean, Cisco is a company that I don't think gets enough credit. It's probably trading too cheap, even on a day where it's up 8%, trading right close to 50. The high of the year has been 58. It's one of these where I think that it's still too cheap where it is right now. It still probably has plenty of room to the upside. Doesn't mean it's going to sprint there, but I think as people start to digest more and more about the moves that they are making to AI and moving out of other areas, and that's part of the reason they're getting rid of as many employees as they are, that I think is something that's very important, and that's actually something hitting the bottom line.
Yeah, and in a little bit of fairness to Cisco, they are a serial buyer of companies.
Yeah.
And whenever you buy a company, you look for what can your employees do that those employees did at that company. And you end up picking the best of the group, and you probably don't need quite as many employees as you would have had if you kept all of their employees. Doesn't mean you don't keep some of them. Some of them might be better than some of them that Cisco had, but you're gonna balance out that employment picture. And to the extent that they've been doing that, that's why the stock's putting up the numbers they are. All right, Pete, another bit of unusual activity in AST SpaceMobile. This sounds like, some sort of science fiction thing, but ASTS is the symbol. Stock trades to the upside. What do? They deliver internet from space. And who is a believer in that? Well, one of the biggest carriers, Verizon, has basically put up some funding for them of about $100 million, Pete. And that's one of the reasons that financial commitment is why they emphasized it during the call. So even though they lost 51 cents a share, people are believing that, hey, this one could be one of the big winners going forward.
Yeah, could be. We'll see. Obviously, those earnings were awful. They lost 51 cents. They were looking to lose about 22 cents. So that was not good. They got the Verizon money, which I think is huge. To your point, it's about $100 million investment there. The cash burn here is awful. The shorts are huge. You're talking 17% on the short side. So is that fuel to possibly give this thing a little bit of this move that we are seeing today? It was up 30% plus the last I looked, and it was an amazing move through the 52-week highs. Absolutely extraordinary. They've got this launch coming not far away as well. So there's a lot of reasons, and I think Verizon probably made a good move here, but there's a lot of reasons why this is a damn interesting thing going on here with AST Mobile. So it's something that I think as I'm looking at the shorts, this squeeze is not feeling good for those folks out there. And I don't think it's over yet. I think there's still a little bit more room to the upside on the squeeze.
Well, Pete, normal turnover, 14 million, already done 31 million so far today. And they were buying the August 24 calls. So those August 24 calls that you see there on the screen, they paid $1 for them. Stock isn't just 25 or 26 anymore. Now it's 29. So those calls are $5. So how'd you like to turn $1 into $5, folks? Because that's what anybody that followed our unusual option activity did. And if you know about options, it's not an option to just trade stock. You got to check it out. It's notanoption.com. You can grab our book and make yourself a better investor, or subscribe to our stuff, of course. Another good idea. Mm-hmm. All right, Pete, let's take a look at one more stock before we go on to your sports. Tesla. Bank of America says Tesla is one of the best beaten down stocks. So we told you about NVIDIA, and it was voted the #1 stock to buy on that aggressive sell-off a week ago Monday. Well, turns out Bank of America says Tesla now is in that same boat, one of the top picks for a big rebound in the second half of this year, which we're in right now. So you got to like that they put their money where their mouth is. and their reputation where their mouths are, Pete, and Tesla making a nice upside move today.
And the interesting thing too, John, is when you look at the Cybertruck, I think it's something very interesting because I would have probably bet against this, but I would have been wrong. It is now the leading top of the heap as far as $100,000 vehicles and higher, and that was last month. That's pretty impressive. On top of that, John, their sales of the Cybertruck are up 11% year over year in July. Then you look at the Model Y, that's up 5%. You look at the Model 3, that's up 30%. I think that people are starting to get attracted again back towards Tesla. For a while there, obviously, everybody was standing back. EVs were kind of something that everybody was kind of moving a little bit away from. Well, it looks like they're coming back to it now. So I think those numbers, on top of other things that, of course, Elon Musk is always up to something, that might be giving it a boost on top of this Bank of America call that it's been sold too hard.
Yep, I think it has, Pete. This has been one when the haters come after Elon for one reason or another. It's almost always been a nice buy. I was owning it back in April at 140, Pete. It's exploded to the upside from there, and right now looks cheap again as it traded down. I forget what the low was last week, Pete, but it was pretty darn low, and I like picking it up under $200 a share a lot.
That seems like a good move.
What do you have as far as some sports talk today, Pete?
Yeah, I just thought we'd look at some of the NFL sleepers as we're getting into the season, and we've got injuries everywhere. We talked about that yesterday, and the Vikings are very disappointed. Everybody's wondering about what's with the Viking curse and all the rest of it, and why does it always happen to them? I just thought it would be fun to see, all right, of the teams that are out there, who probably has done the most, who is likely to be somebody who is not thought of as playoff, or maybe even a little bit further than just getting to the playoffs. I'm going to throw out there the Atlanta Falcons. And the reason I selected them, John, I think that you can look at Green Bay, but I don't know that they're a sleeper. Everybody knows what they did last year. They were in the playoffs. And you look at the Chicago Bears. They got a great draft. They got a quarterback and a receiver, and they already had a lot of pieces to the puzzle. So I don't even think that's a stretch. I don't think they're a sleeper. I think Tampa's probably not a sleeper either. They look pretty good. I think they are positioned well. The Chargers with Harbaugh, I think, can turn this thing around. So last year, 5-12. I don't know how many games they win this year, but I think it might get into the double-digit area just because I think that much about Harbaugh. Seattle, 9-8 last year. New coach, new this, new that. The Atlanta Falcons have B.J. Robinson as a running back. They've got Kirk Cousins as their starter, and then they've got Penix, who's looked really good so far, in the early goings of training camp and the preseason. You got Ray McLeod, you've got Drake London, you've got Pitts, you've got all these great players on offense, a really good offensive line. They went out and got Matthew Judon from the Patriots just yesterday, so they're bunching that up. The other thing that stands out for me is this, John, about Atlanta on defense. They understand that you still have to have big linebackers or you can't stop the run. And everybody thinks, well, but everything in the NFL is about passing. Yeah, kind of, except if you want to get into the playoffs, win the Super Bowl, you usually run the football. So I was looking at their linebackers, 6'3", 260, 6'4", 240, 6'5", 265, 6'5", 250. I was at Viking training camp. I was bigger than every single linebacker out there. Not one of them was over 220 pounds. So gives you a little bit of the yin and the yang. That's why the Vikings defense, in my opinion, can't stand up very well, especially against somebody that's got the size to be able to stop the run, and they've got the horses behind them that can maybe stop a few passes. So I'm going to go with Atlanta.
Yeah, and I think if I had to pick a so-called sleeper, Pete, it would be, like you said, Jim Harbaugh and the L.A. Chargers, not San Diego anymore, folks, L.A. Chargers, because I think he will work with Justin Herbert, and they will be a great combination because they'll give they'll give defenses fits. That's what I think. As far as who makes it, I think the team to beat is still Baltimore. I think more than Kansas City, it's Baltimore. And I know you share that opinion to a large extent because of, King Henry, because he is just a beast. Nobody stops that guy. And now I don't know how you prepare for that. Like you say, at least Atlanta has some big thumpers that could plug those gaps, Pete. But the rest of them are going to be on 50 roller skates. They're going to be going backwards when they try to stop, that big offensive line and that big running back. Yeah. Not to mention that they have a quarterback who's one of the best fleet feet quarterbacks ever to play. So, yeah, I'd keep an eye on them because I think that's something that's going to really light up scoreboards this year.
There's no doubt at quarterback right now, the MVP sitting in Baltimore, and he might be the MVP again now that he's got a running back as well, John. Maybe that'll take a little pressure off him. I mean, that guy is a stud. All right, NCAA college football. This involves you pretty closely for you, actually, because I was trying to figure out who do you think would be the first quarterback in the draft this year in 2020, next year, 2025? Because we're already seeing injuries. We already see this. We already see that. So there's going to be teams that are going to be needing a quarterback again next year. And it makes you kind of wonder, all right, who's some of the best? Well, Shedeur Sanders, for sure. And he had a great year last year. You got to give him all the credit in the world for how he actually held himself. The team didn't play well. The team didn't win enough games. They won early, and then they lost most of the games late. But the reality is it wasn't for lack of him as a quarterback. But that being said, is it Ewers at Texas? Is he more of an NFL quarterback? Is it Sanders, or is it Carson Beck from Georgia? I'm kind of going with Carson Beck because, John, last year the kid lit it up. He threw for 3,800 yards. He had 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. I think the kid is very, very special. I think he's underrated because people are looking at, it's funny. They look at Alabama quarterbacks and they say, this guy's great. They got a great team. It's not just a quarterback. Georgia, same thing. But for whatever reason, those Georgia quarterbacks don't get as much credit. This guy is a 72% completion guy. That's the kind of guy I think you want when you're in the NFL. He's also, I think, 6'5", 220 or something like that. So he's got the size as well to look over people. This is a guy who probably gets overlooked way too much, but that's who I'm going to say might be the first pick of the quarterbacks this coming year.
Well, I don't disagree, and I do love Shedeur. I'll see him a couple times this year when I'm out there to visit my daughter at University of Colorado. Hopefully get to see Dion one of these days, too, in person. But, Pete, I'm going to throw one out that you know who this guy is, but a lot of you don't. This guy only threw for 30 TDs last year, 6 interceptions, so I like the ratio there, Pete, 3,600 yards. It's Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah.
So Oregon, all they do is crank out quarterbacks, and what they do is they seem to steal them from the SEC because that's what they did last time. And that kid went in the draft very high, and you and I were high on that kid. I think he will do great. But Dylan Gabriel's one of these, Pete, and I think he could be one of those surprises. Yeah. I think Ewers, you're right, but he has 22 TDs and 6 interceptions. So this other Dylan Gabriel has 6 more TDs, the same completion average, and the same number of interceptions. So 6 TDs more, and he's playing at Oregon this year, Pete. I like him. Carson Beck at Georgia. How do you not like this guy, Pete? Yeah. Carson Beck, 3,900 yards, 24 TDs. I mean, there's a lot to like here.
Yeah, Dylan Gabriel is a player. I've seen that guy up close and in person once. I've seen him on TV a lot. He's really a special player for sure. And I don't know how Oregon keeps doing it. They attract these quarterbacks. Actually, I do know. You and I both know.
Phil Knight.
Yeah. Phil Knight. You ever heard of Nike, guys? Well, yeah. He's got a lot of money.
The Nike founder.
And he gives a lot of money to Oregon football and Oregon sports. I mean, the track, the football stadium, I mean, you name it. They just say, hey, this is what we need. He just writes him a check. But that kid is a player, and I love that coach. I love that coach, and I loved his reaction. Sorry about this one. I loved his reaction last year when Colorado thought it was okay to have somebody step on their mascot at their stadium, but didn't like it when it happened at their own stadium. So, that was one of those Dion moments where I'm like, really? Oh, that's kind of interesting. But you allowed your guys to do that. But that Oregon coach, he's not afraid of anybody.
No, and he shouldn't be, because like you said, and it's not just because they have the money, but they have a real good eye for talent.
Yeah.
Because there are some other teams that have a lot of money to spend on players, and they either do it not wisely or they're unlucky. Players get hurt, and players transfer from there because they're frustrated about not playing or whatever. And you paid them a bunch of money to come there in the first place.
By the way, I got a sleeper in there real quick. Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. Keep an eye on that kid. He's a baller.
Well, and Pete always says it, but Lane Kiffin, if there is a better offensive coach out there, Sarkisian maybe, Pete, over at Texas, and they were both, were they together at USC ever, Pete? Those two coaches?
That I don't know, but they've both been around the SEC, the Pac-12, they've been the Big 12. I mean, they both have been around the block once or twice for sure.
Yep, two great coaches, and like you say, pro teams have brought Sarkisian in, and so have college teams, to be that quarterback whisperer. And so maybe that's a reason to give viewers the nod this year. And that's not to rip on Shedeur Sanders. I love him. He needs to have a line that can give him time, and a running back that can be an alternative to just him running or him drop back passing every down, because that's what did them in, Pete. After the first 4 games that they won, all of a sudden everybody knew, okay, here's how you shut them down. We'll just send people at him because we don't have to worry about their running game. If you have to worry about their running game, or if he starts hitting the tight ends, yeah, Dion, you should do that, just like Pete always says. All right. Well, folks, thanks for tuning in. We will be back Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget, you can get the book, It's Not an Option, by going to that website, itsnotanoption.com. That's itsnotanoption.com. Whole bunch of new commercials starting up next week. You'll be loving that, I'm sure. Give us a tweet or two, and we'll see you Monday.